for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR FM 89.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for being with us. We're just short weeks away now from Debate Week here on Arkansas PBS, with contestants for 9 statewide or district offices taking questions. An assessment of where those campaigns stand in just a moment from 2 of our go-to analysts. But first, an arrest last Sunday by 3 officers in Crawford County and a bystander's video that went viral within hours. By Monday, all 3 officers had been suspended with pay, pending investigations by the state and the U.S. Department of Justice. Using public records, several news organizations quickly documented that 2 of the officers had been accused previously of misconduct involving force. Civil litigation stemming from Sunday's episode seems all but assured. For now, though, questions an isolated incident or a pattern too seldom documented. Employment and training standards for sworn officers adequate or insufficient? Joining us now, Fred Witherspoon, Deputy Director of the Arkansas Law Enforcement Training Academy. Mr. Witherspoon, thanks very much for being with us. Under the circumstances, there's a limit, I know, to what you can discuss with pending state and federal investigations into the Crawford County episode. But it does raise a question. Are these episodes, such episodes as were documented in Crawford County and Mulberry, are these isolated incidents, or are they underreported, underdocumented, more of them than we know?
Well, Steve, I'm going to err on the side of caution in saying that these are isolated incidents because Arkansas law enforcement personnel are some of the best trained in the country. And with any profession, there's always going to be an incident or opportunity for an unfortunate situation to arise. So that's going to be our position on that.
Well, in terms of employment standards, well, let's take both employment and training. It was pointed out to me a couple of days ago that in many other countries anyway, and it's not restricted to Arkansas or the United States, but many other countries, the employment and training standards are substantially higher. The employment requirements are higher. Training standards are higher than they are in the United States and in Arkansas. You want to comment on that?
Well, the standards that we have adopted was approved by the Law Enforcement Standards Commission on training. And I feel that the training that we offer the Arkansas law enforcement personnel, again, is the best that we have. And because our training personnel, they are constantly and regularly attending updated training seminars, in-service training. So if they are way ahead of us, it couldn't be by much.
Well, in terms of employment standards, though, are they high enough in Arkansas? Do we require enough of our entry-level officers?
I think that the current standards that we have adopted under Class Rule 1005 clearly, 1005 clearly indicates that the adopted training is sufficient to meet the requirements for an officer to be a law enforcement officer in the state of Arkansas.
Well, in Arkansas, it's weeks or months of training. In some Western nations, it's years. That would seem to be a substantially higher standard than is followed here. Is that practical in the United States, in Arkansas?
I would have to say, Steve, 13 weeks is sufficient in that you realize that the citizens of Arkansas are paying these salaries of these officers while they're away attending training. And by the same token, those 13 weeks of training are very intensive and inclusive of legislative mandates, federal laws and regulations that have been handed down to us. So we are in compliance with those recommendations and mandates.
Well, isolated though they may be, incidents such as this do attack the credibility of law enforcement as a whole, and it raises or underscores a persistent problem in the criminal justice community, and that's that some segments of the population, particularly communities of color, can't trust their own police.
Well, it's unfortunate that perception does exist. But I want to reassure all citizens of Arkansas, law enforcement can be trusted, and that we have professionals out there serving them every single day. They suit up to do the job, and they're doing it to the best of their ability and skill set. And our training end of the table is that we are doing everything possible to make sure when they leave these academies, that they are prepared to do the job to the expected level.
Fred Weatherspoon of the Arkansas Law Enforcement Training Academy, thanks very much for being with us. Thank you.
Yes.
And we'll be back in a moment with Arkansas politics. We are back, and the November elections are fast approaching. So is debate week here on Arkansas PBS. The nominees in the major state and district contests will be questioned beginning October 17th. We'll run through them really quick. Beginning on Monday, October the 17th, there will be meetings of the nominees in the 4th Congressional District and in the 3rd Congressional District. Following day on Tuesday, the candidates for Lieutenant Governor, some familiar faces along the way here. The Lieutenant Governor's debate, also Secretary of State. Following day on Wednesday the 19th, Attorney General. Come Thursday, October 20th, in the 1st Congressional District and in the 2nd Congressional District, all the nominees there. And on Friday, the marquee races. The campaign for governor and for the United States Senate. So we know that you'll want to join us that week. Elsewhere in the nation, the Democrats and their party's leader have had some successes of late, but too late to make any difference. And will those victories in Congress and in congressional elections make any difference here? Joining us now from the left, Democratic consultant Michael Cook. And from the right, the GOP's Richard Bearden. Gentlemen, thanks as always for coming in. Why don't we start there? And a brief explainer. These congressional elections elsewhere in the country have real significance for Arkansas because the margins, the leadership majorities in the House and Senate are so narrow it can make the difference between ranking member and Mr. Chairman or Madam Chair. Richard, you see much impact here.
Well,
things suddenly looking brighter, a little bit brighter.
They are. Look, the president and the Democrats have had a good 10-day, 2-week period. Someone I saw on one of the political talk shows suggested the president should stay in the basement a little bit more because, you know, you had the Democrat senator from Arizona and the Democrat senator Joe Makin from West Virginia come out and negotiate a little bit more. But it was a good week, and I'll concede, good week for the Democrats, good week for the president. The question is, we're about to just now get into where people are thinking about politics. So how does the momentum rise and wane over the coming few months? Nationally, how does that affect things? I know the Democrats also won a special election in New York, but I've seen a lot of pundits saying very small turnout, very focused turnout, but probably flips back to the Republican. It was a Republican-held seat, won by the Democrats, swings back. So I think there'll be some key races we can talk about around the country for the Senate. The House looks like it could well flip Republican. The Senate will be very close, depending on a couple of key races.
Yeah, Michael.
We're heading into a unique environment that I've never really seen before. Typically in midterms, the party in power who has the White House, they tend to just kind of lose seats and have a lot of headwinds.
There are lining up jobs.
Exactly, exactly. This time around, it's still obviously a difficult environment for Democrats. That can't be discounted. But they do have some wind in their sails. It's a combination of things that President Joe Biden has accomplished with the Inflation Reduction Act and other the CHIPS Act that makes a difference in people's lives. And then other factors that were out of his control, the Dobbs decision that basically ended abortion rights for tens of millions of women across the country, which has, 1992 was the year of the woman. We talked about that. Now, 30 years later, I think people are calling it the year of the ticked-off woman. We're seeing the voter surges and registration in women voters across the country. Nationally, I think the fact that there is this momentum on Democratic side is going to make a big difference in the Senate races. Republicans have just horrible candidates in Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. Here in Arkansas, though, the reality, even though there is this environment that's helpful for Democrats nationally, it's not going to make any big difference on the statewide races or the congressional races. But I will say on some close legislative seats, it could help out on the margins, help some Democrats either retain or maybe pick up a seat or two here and there.
Yeah, Richard?
Not so fast, my friend, as Leopold says.
It was legislative seats. I didn't say we're going to win the U.S. Senate.
Fact just out in Politico today, 1 million voters switched to the Republican Party in warning for Dems, says the Associated Press. And what was interesting is 1 million new voters, 42 states was the breadth of where we're all in the suburbs. And if you remember from the last election, President Trump lost the suburbs. He lost that suburb woman. So I do think the Dobbs decision is going to be important.
Well, another factoid, though, since the Dobbs decision, women voters nationwide has jumped up, I think, between 11 and 17%. So that voter registration rates and in terms of turnout among women voters in these special elections of the primary has been through the roof. So that's what I'm saying. It's going to be it's a difficult dynamic for Democrats, but it's not going to be the typical midterm election, I don't think.
I completely agree. And I think some of the dynamics are going to be driven by the Dobbs decision. Some are going to be driven by inflation. These same moms are at the gas pumps. They're at the grocery stores paying higher prices for everyday food staples. And I think that also will drive a lot of voter turnout and how they vote.
Lunch bucket issues, always.
At 100%, it's the economy.
Yeah.
Stupid. Yeah.
Well, back to Dobbs and to Roe for just a second. As Michael pointed out, nationwide it has spurred female voter registration and perhaps political activism to levels not seen certainly in recent years. Given the distance that mindset has to travel in Arkansas, will that make any significant difference here?
In Arkansas, not really. I mean, it's such a red state. The Republican nominees for various statewide offices, their leads, I'm sure, are very, very wide, to put it mildly. I do think, but like I said, I think on the local level, on some of these closer legislative seats, I think it will make a difference. You know, this Dobbs decision was a political bomb that I don't think we've ever seen in my lifetime, at least in terms of how it just remixed everything and has made so many people mad in various degrees. That nationwide it'll make a difference here in Arkansas. I don't see it too much.
Richard, the last Gallup I saw a couple of days ago indicated that the gains that Mr. Biden is doing, as we've all agreed, Mr. Biden has had a pretty good 2 weeks here. He's at a level, I think, of approval, anyway, in the latest Gallup that I saw, that was the highest he's been since he took office. And his gains have been among swing voters.
Yeah.
Suburban voters, ex-urban voters.
Again, the president, I concede, has had a good 10 days. Prior to that, he's had a horrible year. And so, you know, the question is, as you go through the grind when people are starting to pay attention, does that hold or not hold? I would agree with Michael. I think there are some pocket areas where Democrats could do very well. Pulaski County, potentially one of those areas. But there's not that many competitive seats in the Delta or Pine Bluff, Jefferson County, or Eureka Springs, another, or Fayetteville. There's maybe a House seat or two up there. So, I mean, you know, here, I think the Democrats are going to be faced with a Republican ticket from Senate all the way down to Land Commissioner that are all well-funded. And the burden, as you know, anytime you're a challenger, is to get your name out there. And I think that's just going to be, the dollars are not flowing to the candidates in enough amounts for them to get out and mount a credible campaign to the widespread electorate.
Well, and it would appear, too, from the advertising that yours truly has seen thus far, the burden is Biden. We've got one GOP nominee whose motto apparently is fighting the Biden agenda.
Yeah, I mean, but what's interesting, we're seeing this nationwide. I can't disagree with anything Richard said in terms of the Democrats have serious problems in Arkansas. It's going to be that way for some time. But what we're seeing in national polls is sort of a decoupling of the president's approval ratings versus some of these candidates who are running, that they're running ahead of the president's approval ratings. I mean, we're probably going to take back the seat in Pennsylvania, probably hold on to the seat in Arizona, all because of the quality of the candidates and the environment that has happened. Because we've not even talked about the other problem Republicans face, the Dobbs decision, but Trump is now back in the news. I mean, this is the worst thing for Republicans because now they have to embrace him, and people just swing voters detest Trump, and Republicans, if they don't embrace him, then they lose. So they're caught in this trap where they have to defend the fact that he's got, the nuclear codes in Mar-a-Lago or whatever they are. They're caught in that vice of the Trump factor, and the more Trump is in the news, which I think we're going to see more and more over the next couple months, that's the worst thing that can be happening for Republicans.
I would note a couple of those elsewhere. Those Democratic nominees are running they're running in spite of Biden, and they're making it clear that they're running in spite of Biden.
Michael mentioned a couple of key states, and I was just looking at, again, a couple of national publications, but the Senate, which I think literally could flip either way. Arizona, Georgia, New Hampshire, Nevada, Pennsylvania. 5 states. Wisconsin, another Republican-held seat. Pennsylvania, Republican-held seat. So you're literally talking about, again, some already very contested seats. Wisconsin, a true swing state. Georgia, now a purplish true swing state that could determine the United States Senate. There's a very close race out in Nevada. Be a lot of money poured in out there in these other seats. So the Senate, very, very close. Again, I think a lot of this is going to come down to what are those lunch bucket type issues that voters face. If gas, which has come down, but if it still remains high, if bread remains high, the question is the Dobbs decision or milk and bread and school supplies for kids, which of those issues are going to balance out in the voter's mind when they go in the voting booth? And I would argue it is the economy stupid, to coin an old phrase from the Clinton campaign, and I think that's going to be the determining factor.
I think it's obviously lunch bucket issues are always important, don't get me wrong, but the kitchen table issues, health care rights that are taken away from women, that's a kitchen table issue that families have serious heart-to-heart talks about of what they do with their health care. That's a part of the discussion now. And on top of that, you have, as I said, Trump, and not even mentioned the January 6th committee meetings that have been happening over the summer with all these just horrific things we've learned about the slow-moving coup that the Republicans and Trump tried to implement on different levels. So yes, you do have inflation. It's a serious concern. Gas prices have been dropping literally every day for months now. So unemployment is still at historic lows. It's still a tough environment. But the fact that we're talking about that the Democrats might be able to hold on to the Senate and hold their losses low in the House, that is very good news for the party in power in the White House in a midterm election, where historically you just get creamed and waxed in the midterms.
It's good news on August 26th. Let's see where we are on October the 5th.
October 3rd. Well, in fact, most of and of course, you're looking at just the GOP side, but Michael, I haven't seen a survey yet, a reliable poll yet, that shows Mr. DeSantis of Florida comes close sometimes, but you put the two of them on the ballot, and it's Trump every time. If he files, he wins the primary. Yeah. So it would seem that the rank and file are not as disabused of Mr. Trump as perhaps the Democrats would wish.
Oh, no, the rank and file Republicans, they love Donald Trump. That's who they want as their nominee. His approval ratings are 85, 90%. That's the worst thing for Republicans in terms of the general election, because now all their elected officials have to embrace Trump. They can't say anything negative about him. And Trump is the death knell for swing voters, for Republicans. That just kills them. The fact that we're even talking about a president who left office 2 years ago, we've never seen that before. With Bush left, he disappeared. Obama, Clinton kind of hung around a little bit, but nothing like the fact that this is dominating the news. The fact that we're talking about that's where Republicans are having problems, is that we're not talking about inflation. We're talking about documents in the basement at Mar-a-Lago. That's what's dominating the news coverage, and that's hurting, Republican chances.
Dominating the coverage, but Richard, is it resonating across the broad electorate?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I actually think the president, former president, got an uptick in the polls approval rating, whatever, when people saw the FBI rating Mar-a-Lago. Don't know all the details. I think Donald Trump's got a lot of hurdles to jump through before he determines whether he's going to run again for the presidency. And as you mentioned, DeSantis, we have our own governor, Asa Hutchinson, who's putting his toe out there. There will be others, Tim Scott, there will be other candidates that come to the forefront to determine about whether they do or don't run for the presidency. So I think we're a long way off of that, away from that. I think to some degree these midterms will determine where our party goes as Republicans and how much of a burden, or has he leveled the ship a little bit, President Biden is for the Democrats. In Arkansas, it will not matter. We won't we will not see President Biden even fly over the state of Arkansas, because I don't think the Democrats want him here.
Yeah, but you're giving it an Arkansas flavor again. It is sort of remarkable, though, because you see in Washington Mr. Trump and Mr. Leader McConnell plainly despise each other.
Oh, yeah.
And now Mr. McConnell has openly been, fair to say, contemptuous of some of his own party's senatorial nominees in some of the states that Michael mentioned. But here in Arkansas, you used the phrase "right the ship." Mr. Hutchinson has spent the last 2 years trying to, in his own way, right the ship, trying to steer it back toward a more centrist course, which he says he's trying to do now.
Yeah, and you know, this may be, I think history, this will be the first time a Republican governor will hand off to another Republican governor. I don't know that that's ever happened. I was trying to think through if it is. So
I don't think so.
You know, it will be, and of course, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the daughter of former Governor Mike Huckabee, the last Republican governor.
Well, that makes it a little rich. I mean,
yeah, no, that's right.
There's
a lot of there. And look, I think there are folks say, you know, gosh, Sarah's young. Sarah's grown up in politics. She was on the front line of it at the Trump White House, which was not an easy job to have every day, to stand up and defend some of the president's policies. But Sarah has surrounded herself with good folks. I think, should she win the election, the polls all point to she's in a great shape. There's going to be a very easy transition from one Republican governor to the other, and I think Sarah will be able to hit the ground running with a supermajority Republican legislature to continue that legacy and build her own new legacy.
One thing I would add to this in terms of how Arkansas politics changes is that Sarah Sanders is the nominee for governor and more than likely wins the governorship simply because Donald Trump said, I want her to be the nominee. That's all it took. You had a sitting attorney general and a sitting lieutenant governor, former congressman, who put in the time paying their dues, and the former president said, nope, sorry, Sarah Sanders gets to be the nominee. And they had to drop out. And that we've never seen that kind of just sort of, I don't know what you call it in terms of you can't think, nope, sorry, Sarah Sanders gets to be the nominee.
They reshuffled.
Well, the great reshuffling actually began before that. There was a gentleman named Mr. Cotton who'd been away from the state for like 20 years. He parachutes back into the 4th Congressional District, says, I'm running with an R beside my name, and wham. He goes in.
But it's a different dynamic. He fought for the race and got himself elected.
Sure.
I'm saying the fact that the Attorney General and the Lieutenant Governor had to chicken out because that's how much Donald Trump has sway over the Republican rank and file. That if he says, and that's the other problem Republicans face nationally, horrible nominees on the Republican side in Pennsylvania and Georgia and I believe Ohio. Because Donald Trump, these are Donald Trump nominees, and now they face losings because, like Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, he is a horrible candidate. He knows what a crudité is and how to put that together. And John Fetterman has been hammering him out. In fact, he lives in New Jersey. But the Republicans' problem is Trump said, these are my nominees, and now they may not be able to retake the Senate because of Donald Trump.
Crudité or veggie tray?
I'm probably a veggie tray guy myself.
Yeah, but, more of a barbecue tray, I guess.
Yeah, ribs or or chicken anyway. Is there a path forward? Do you see? And I ask you this periodically. I ask all of our Democratic. Do you see a path forward in the near term for the Democratic Party?
The path is long and rocky. Was what I say. Is that it's going to take many years. We're not going to win the governorships and Senate races right away. But the things we have going for us is the growth and massive changes in Northwest Arkansas. Look, we're not going to win a lot of seats up there this time around. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we're going to slowly. You look over the past 10 years, Democrats used to get like 36%, then they get 38, then they get 40. Now they're at 42, they're at 44. So you slowly see this again, it's going to be some cycles before we get there, but that's where I think the pathway to taking back some things go through is Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah. Policy or demographics, Richard?
You know, a little of both. I agree with Michael, and we were in politics at the state parties at the same time, and except the roles were reversed. The Republicans had 26 in the House, and you know, the process policy drove a lot of rural voters away from the Democrats into the Republican column. You actually saw, I think we had 3 or 4 Democratic elected officials who switched parties and have been reelected as Republicans. All in rural Arkansas. And so, you know, it is a slow process. I've been there. It's not fun. It's not fun to have to go out and try to raise money when you can't get people excited about anybody on your ticket to a large degree. And I saw just the other day, I think Sarah, on the last report, it was like a 13-to-1 cash on hand advantage. Heading in, you know, 100 and whatever you are out, 20, 130 days out. That's impossible to try to make up. But I think it's going to be policy and demographics. Republicans in Northwest Arkansas have had to sort of morph to some issues that are important to folks up there as new people have moved in from California and Washington State and Oregon. But those core values are still there for the Republican Party.
Yeah, got to end it there because we're out of time. Gents, come back soon. I know you will. And that's it for us for this week. Thanks for joining us. As always, see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR FM 89.